You say something real, something honest, something that doesn't fit into the surface-level rhythm they've created, and it doesn't land. No one laughs. No one responds. They shift in their seats, someone clears their throat, and another says, "Anyway." The moment is gone, but you felt it. That small rejection, that unspoken discomfort, happens more often than you care to admit. Carl Jung understood this perfectly. He believed that the deeper you go into your own mind, the more alienated you become from the world around you. Not because you're broken, but because the world prefers illusion. It rewards those who conform, who blend in, who nod without questioning, and who pretend to be okay even when everything inside them is falling apart. But deep thinkers are the ones who don't pretend. They can't, because they see through the fake smiles, empty traditions, and hollow systems. Jung once said, "The more intelligent and self-aware a person is, the more they suffer from the general unconsciousness of society." That's not a compliment, it's a warning. In a society that doesn't value depth, being self-aware is not a superpower, it's a curse. And that curse starts early. From childhood, most deep thinkers are misunderstood. They ask questions other kids don't. They wonder why grown-ups lie, why rules are arbitrary, and why love sometimes feels conditional. Instead of answers, they're told, "Don't ask too much. Just do as you're told. Why can't you be like the other kids?" So, they learn to stay quiet. But inside, the questions never stop. They just grow sharper and heavier. By the time they become adults, they've built entire worlds inside their minds, filled with unspoken thoughts, unseen truths, and unexplored feelings. But the external world doesn't welcome that. At work, they're told to follow scripts. In relationships, they're told they're too intense. On social media, they're told to just be positive, so they hide. Again, not because they want to, but because they've learned what happens when they don't. Carl Jung believed that society fears what it doesn't understand, and deep thinkers are deeply misunderstood. When you express a complex idea, people think you're showing off. When you sit in silence, they think you're judging them. When you talk about trauma, they think you're being dramatic. When you ask questions, they say you're overthinking. But you're not overthinking, you're seeing clearly. You're observing what others miss and feeling what others are afraid to feel. That makes people uncomfortable not because you're wrong, but because you're right. You speak truths that others spend their whole lives avoiding. You bring light to shadows they've kept buried. You remind them that something is missing, and that reminder is painful. That's why deep thinkers are often met with resistance, mockery, or distance. Not because of who they are, but because of what they represent, a mirror to all that's been suppressed. Jung called this the encounter with the shadow, and most people don't want to meet their shadow, so they reject the person who reflects it. That person is often you. Have you ever tried to warn someone? To tell them a hard truth before it was too late? And instead of gratitude, you got silence, anger, or were ghosted completely. You weren't being negative, you were being real. But real is dangerous. Real doesn't sell. Real doesn't entertain. Real makes people think, and thinking hurts. Jung said most people don't think, they just rearrange their prejudices. They repeat what they've heard and defend what they've been taught. They perform. But deep thinkers question, deconstruct, and reconstruct. They stay up at night wrestling with contradictions. They don't seek approval, they seek understanding, and in doing so, they often lose the approval of those who live on the surface. That's the tragedy of awareness. The more you awaken, the more isolated you become, not because you're broken, but because everyone else is asleep. Yet, you still try to connect. You try to dim your light to make others comfortable, to soften your words so you don't scare them. You try to fit in, but it never works because truth has a frequency. Once you vibrate at that level, you can't go back to pretending. If you've ever felt like you were too much for the world, you weren't wrong. You weren't broken. You were simply born into a system that was never designed to support depth. Carl Jung called it mass-mindedness, the idea that most people don't think independently. They simply absorb what culture gives them without questioning if it's real or right. From the moment you enter this world, you're handed a script. You're told what success means, what failure looks like, and to smile even when you're sad. If you follow that script, the world applauds. But if you question it, you're the problem. You're too sensitive or too difficult. But here's what Jung knew: you're not too anything. You're just awake, and the world fears what's awake. Think back to school. Were you rewarded for creativity and philosophical thinking, or for memorizing the right answers and sitting still? The world doesn't want you to think deeply. It wants you to follow, because followers are profitable and predictable. A system that discourages inner exploration is a system built on fear. Fear of the human soul. That fear becomes our culture, our dating lives, and our work, where status is prioritized over meaning. Jung believed the soul isn't meant to move at the speed of modern life. It needs space, silence, and shadow. Deep thinkers don't just seek that space, they create it. And when they do, others feel uncomfortable because they've been taught to fear silence. When a deep thinker walks into a room, they carry a stillness that isn't empty, but full. People feel seen, and for those hiding from themselves, being seen is terrifying. This is why deep thinkers are labeled as loners or weird. Jung said, loneliness does not come from being alone, but from being unable to communicate the things that seem important to you. How many times have you wanted to talk about meaning or purpose, only to be met with small talk? How many times have you dulled yourself down just to be understood? That isn't connection, it's survival. And surviving in a world that doesn't understand depth comes at a cost. You begin to doubt yourself, but don't. The moment you abandon your depth is the moment you abandon your soul. You are the hope of an unconscious society. But being a deep thinker makes life harder because you don't get to lie to yourself. You feel everything: the beauty, the tragedy, the silence. In a world that tells you to numb, feeling is rebellion. So rebel. If you feel tired, spiritually and mentally, it's because you enter a room and sense the tension before anyone speaks. Jung called this unconscious vampirism. People are drawn to your depth, but they're also afraid of it. They extract your insight and your calm, but they rarely give it back. When you set a boundary, they call you selfish. But your silence isn't rejection, it's survival. You're recharging because being awake in an unconscious world is draining. The average person is bombarded by ads telling them they aren't enough, but deep thinkers see the manipulation. You see the hollow performance of social media and wonder why no one talks about grief or shame. Jung believed the collective unconscious is currently afraid of depth, so systems from school to work are designed to suppress it. But deep thinkers can't just keep going blindly. They pause, they reflect, and the world punishes them for it. However, being real in a society built on performance is a radical act. You might lose friends or promotions because you refuse to play the game, but that refusal is powerful. Jung said, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakes." You are awake. The price is isolation, but there is hope. There are others like you waiting for someone to say the thing everyone's afraid to admit. When two deep thinkers meet, the illusion cracks and the soul feels less alone. So don't numb your insight. There comes a moment where you must decide, shrink and conform, or expand into your truth. The world will beg you to conform, but surviving isn't enough for someone like you. You were born with a mind that refuses to be tamed. That is your calling. Not everyone is meant to walk into the fire of the self and come out changed, but you are. That emptiness you feel isn't failure, it's space for who you truly are. Deep thinkers aren't here to be understood by the many, they are here to awaken the few. You are a mirror. Solitude is not loneliness, it is finally seeing yourself. Stop begging to be chosen. You were never too much. You were simply too real. Once you embrace your inner complexity, you become medicine. You just need to stay awake and stop apologizing. Slowly, the right people, those who crave depth, will find you. Let the world call you too intense. Smile gently and go even deeper. The world needs your rawness and your courage. Jung believed that only when individuals transform themselves can society evolve. Stop asking for permission. Start valuing yourself so deeply that others have no choice but to rise or leave. Deep thinking is about being true to your soul. If this echoed inside you, let's keep this space alive. Comment one word that describes how you feel. Subscribe because here, you never have to apologize for your mind. We are the ones trying to save the world, even when no one noticed.